Well, Razorback fans, it seems that somebody believes that Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium is one of the toughest places to play in college football. Is it? Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of the John Nabors Show, which you can catch every weekday afternoon starting at 6 on Natty State Sports and nattystatesports.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Wednesday, as a few things that we'll talk about today, and especially with some Razorback basketball / baseball news, and dealing with some players that are added into the mix and everything. So some really fascinating things to be discussing there. But I wanted to discuss really about something that was really fascinating from Fox College Football. And we know that EA Sports is going to be putting out a college football video game since it's been so long since they've been able to do so. And one of the things that they're adding into the mix is a cool thing that they had back when I used to play it all the time, of the atmospheric elements to playing on the road. You know, the louder it is, the toughest place it is to play, the tougher it is for your, the opposing quarterback or the away team's quarterback to go through plays, to have audibles. Like, it impacts the gameplay, essentially. And I've always loved that element of the game, and I'm so glad that it's returning. And I don't know, I'm starting to get kind of excited about college football being back in the video game form. But either way, Fox College Football put out the list of the top 25 toughest places to play according to the new college football game. Now, we can sit here and debate about the numbers of who's at what, and who's in the top 5, who's number 1 and everything, because Texas A&M is number 1. I don't know about that. I'm sure a lot of people, and I know a lot of people had issues with it. So yeah, that was a problem. But you had Alabama at 2, LSU at 3, Ohio State at 4, Georgia at 5, Penn State 6, Wisconsin at 7, Oklahoma at 8, Florida State 9, Florida 10. So, just pretty basic. I mean, you could sit here and again debate about the numbers and where it's at, but all the atmospheres is kind of renowned for being really electric and really crazy is listed here. And what they've done as far as factoring into what this all means and everything is the fact that they've put together home winning percentage, home game attendance, active home game winning streaks, team prestige, and a lot more. Like, that's kind of what they've gone into. And so they have the top 25 list. And I'll be honest, if somebody came to me and was asking about the EA Sports video game, like, hey, do you think Arkansas is in the top 25 of the toughest places to play? I'd probably say, no, probably not. Maybe on the outside looking in, just because of if that's the factors that they're going off of home winning percentage and home game attendance and active home winning streaks and team prestige. Arkansas doesn't really have a whole lot of either of those. But that's what college football is all about. It's ever changing. Sometimes it can develop and everything. But regardless, Arkansas made it into the top 25 as the number 23 toughest places to play in all of college football. Now, it kind of reminds me almost of recruiting rankings in a way, because even though Arkansas is 23rd in the country, they are 11th in the SEC out of 16 teams. A&M, Bama, LSU, Georgia, Oklahoma, Florida, Tennessee, Auburn, South Carolina, Texas, all those teams are above them. And honestly, I don't have really an argument for it. I'm not going to sit here and try to say that Arkansas should be above any of those SEC teams. The only one I'm not too sure about is the South Carolina element, but they do have some traditions and whatnot. So I'm not going to argue with them. But either way, Arkansas sitting there, even though they're 23rd in the country, they're 11th in the SEC. And it's a wild thing, because I know about Bud Walton Arena. We all do. Bud Walton Arena, when the team's good, there is not an atmosphere like it. Like, there are very few atmospheres that can even contend or be in the conversation of being some of the best college basketball atmospheres, and Bud Walton Arena, without question, is one of them. Time and time, year in year, year over year, every single year, it's that way. The atmosphere is unmatched. Baum Walker Stadium, kind of the same thing. You know, like, and just take the facilities or take the places around all of the sports at the University of Arkansas, and I would always say that those places, those atmospheres, those, like, the attendance, the facility, whatever it is, can contend with anybody and put it up with anybody, except for football. Like, honestly, it's like football has never been, even in the heyday, even when things were going good and great, I never viewed Razorback Stadium as one of the top atmospheres in all of college football. Not saying it's bad, not saying it's not had its moments, but I've just never looked at it that way. So when this list came out and I saw him in the top 25, I started wondering, I'm like, okay, so there must be something there that has Arkansas being worthy of that. So I started to also think about the atmospheres that Arkansas has had previously in Razorback Stadium that showcased it. Because that's the thing. It's like, it can be that level great. It can be that intimidating. Because there are still folks, former college football players, that have referred to Arkansas and Razorback Stadium as the loudest place they've ever played in. Greg McElroy, former quarterback for Alabama, has said that. Jalen Hurts, former Alabama quarterback, has said that. People have said it. And that, you know, could mean one thing. It could just be playing up like, oh, well, he must have said on Arkansas radio or something. No, he didn't. Like, those guys didn't. They talked about it elsewhere. So for those guys who played in Baton Rouge, against LSU, against teams like Auburn, against, teams out of the SEC East, they chose Arkansas. So there's obviously a way and an element and a level that Arkansas has gotten to in some capacities of having that type of level of an atmosphere. It's just the lack of consistency. Because let's be honest, the lack of consistency has been kind of the MO for Razorback football over the past decade. There's no rhyme or reason to any of it. Your best record that you have in the SEC was 5-3 in the past 10 years. And in that year you went 5-3, you still finished 7-5. No rhyme or reason. The one game you won in the SEC play this past year was when you beat Florida on the road for the first time ever. No rhyme or reason. So Arkansas has proven that at the atmospheric level, it can be to that point. But I think back to the 2010 Alabama game as being one of the most iconic atmospheres and energy levels going into a game that I've ever experienced. I still think it's the greatest atmosphere. And then you throw into the mix of, say, one like Texas back in 2004. Awesome atmosphere. Texas of 2021, like, that was an incredible atmosphere. Ole Miss of 2016 was an incredible atmosphere. Even the South Carolina game of 2011 was an incredible atmosphere. It was a top 10 matchup. USC, when they came to town in 2006, that was an incredible matchup. So there have been times where these matchups have been pretty incredible and been pretty good. But it just hasn't been consistent enough. I mean, if you think about it, folks, just taking the past 10 years, with all those atmospheres I mentioned, there's really only been about 2 or 3 that really stand out. You could say the LSU game of 2014 when they rushed the field. That was great and all, but I don't know. Like, I would not consider that to be one of the greatest atmospheres I was ever in. A lot of that has to do with the lack of success of the team, and, that's obviously a factor into it. But the point is, it's capable. Razorback Stadium is capable of being one of the best atmospheres in college football. But just like in anything, the winning has to come along with it. Because, like, let's take this year, for instance, this upcoming season. Am I expecting one of these games at home to be one of the best atmospheres that Razorback Stadium's ever had? I would love that if it did happen, because what that would mean, more than likely, is that Arkansas is actually performing pretty well. That'd be awesome. But think about this home schedule that you have, especially in SEC play. You're playing Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas. That is an incredible home schedule. Incredible. And if you are good enough, if you're a relevant enough team, if Arkansas was entering into the season as a top 20 team and they had that expectation, I would have no doubts that if they lived up to that expectation, at least by the time those games happened, the atmosphere would be amazing for all of those games. Incredible. Next level great. But they're not entering into the season like that. So there's a lot of moving parts to it. But the point is, I applaud EA Sports putting in Arkansas as one of the top 25 toughest places to play in college football. If people disagree with that, I'm not going to argue with them. But I will argue the fact that it's not capable. Some places just aren't capable. Some places just, their peak is bleh, and that's it. But Arkansas has shown time and time again it is capable. And you know why? Because of you. Because you're an insane person. You're an insane Razorback fan. And when you're hyped up and excited about something, you show up in droves. You show up 80,000 strong, and you go insane. No matter what. So I applaud you for it. Just like I applaud EA Sports for that, too. All right, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about the portal here in just a second, but I got to tell you about Gametime and the Gametime app. Listen, we know that when it comes to sporting events, when it comes to concerts, when it comes to shows, comedy shows, theater, whatever it is, we got to have a ticket, right? I mean, that's pretty much since the beginning of time, you've had to have a ticket for things. But sometimes ticket processing and buying tickets have been pretty complicated and pretty annoying. Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore with the Gametime app. The Gametime app has you covered when it comes to all the best features when finding the right seat for the right event at the right price. One of the best things that they have going on is they have last-minute deals. So say if you're like, hey, there's a show going on right here across the street. I didn't even think about going, but hey, let's look into going. It starts here in a couple of minutes. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, for concerts, comedy, theater, everything. They also have zone deals where you can save even more by choosing a section and let Gametime choose the seats for you and save money there. And my favorite feature is the all-in pricing, where when you click that feature and toggle that feature, it's going to give you the money and the cost of the price of the tickets up front. You don't have to worry about these hidden fees where you're like, oh, man, this is a great deal. And then you go through a few steps and suddenly your price has been doubled. They don't do that. You toggle that and it shows you the exact price up front, no additional cost. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or any tickets with the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app and create an account using code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your very first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So, again, the portal is always interesting. Anytime you can add a few players and everything. And I'll start with the basketball because the basketball and baseball both had a couple of things happening for them. But there were a couple commitments for Razorback basketball that may have been like what you're like wondering about, like, okay, don't really know what's happening there, but it's like what's been taking so long for that? Well, they added a few. One of them was Melo Sanchez. Melo Sanchez is expected to be a full scholarship addition, scoring to 24/7 Sports. He's 6'4", 185 pounds, and he comes to Arkansas after playing for Hawaii Pacific, which is a D2 school, for the past 2 seasons, where he averaged close to 15 points a game, 5 rebounds a game, 1.5 assists per game, shooting 36%, 35%, and 80% splits across 29 games last year. So he's been added into the mix. And you also had a guard, and I'm going to try to pronounce his name. I'm sure I'm going to get it wrong. Jaden Karutua. I don't know. That's the best as you're going to get it. But either way, he committed to the Razorbacks, and he's also going to be a full scholarship. He's 6'6", 180 pounds. He's from Sun Valley, California. Played at Village Christian High School last season. He averaged 14 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and 1.5 steals as a senior. So now Arkansas has 12 players officially, because Lawson Blake's coming back, obviously, as a walk-on. And then you also throw in Trevin Brazil coming back. So they're getting closer and closer to having a full 13-team roster, 13-player roster. And it kind of goes hand in hand of how Cal wanted to handle those players and how he wanted to handle, hey, I just want these amount of players that are going to play, and the rest of them we'll just kind of add in later. So he's at least being consistent in that. So very nice to continue to see that. But what was really exciting was actually the Razorback baseball team, because we'll talk a little bit about baseball in a second. But 2 West Coast players, of course. Anytime you get players from the West Coast, it's always, interesting. But Fresno State at transfer, he's an outfielder, Rocco Pepe. My goodness. Rocco Pepe. Yep, I'm here for that. Also, Oregon State right-handed pitcher Aiden Jimenez. Both had committed to Arkansas. So this is what's great, man. It's like you're getting players from programs that are legit, and the fact that you're able to get a guy from Fresno State and then also a right-handed pitcher from Oregon State is great. Jimenez is 6'3", 216 pounds, according to HawkSports.com. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore next year. He's the second pitcher to commit. Because also last week, I guess we also need to mention this, Ohio State left-hander Layden. Oh, man, I had this. I kept putting it in my mind of how I was going to pronounce his name. Biddleshees? I don't know. I don't think that's it. I even heard it, and I had it ready, and now I just completely forgot about it. So apologies to Landon, but he's a left-hander. And he's a rising junior who also committed on Monday. So Jimenez, but he did not pitch for the Oregon State team. He had season-ending surgery back in February. Nothing was reported on that. But as a freshman, he went 5-2 with a 5.68 ERA, struck out 35, and walked 7 in 38 innings. And batters had a 283 average against him. So he threw, apparently, according to D1 Baseball, threw a 94 to 96 mile an hour fastball, which is nice. And which is pretty good. So then Pepe, though, he's a guy that people need to really be excited about. He's going to be a redshirt junior this upcoming year. He batted .327. I like that. From the right side, and had 14 home runs, 16 doubles, 56 RBIs, 43 runs scored in 56 games in his only year playing for the Bulldogs. He primarily batted second in the lineup, but started in left field at 38 times. He also started 12 times as a designated hitter and 3 times in right field. He's 5'11", 200 pounds. He's from Huntington Beach, California. He spent time at Long Beach State, where he was All Big West Conference. Honorable mention for the All Big West Conference in 2022. And he just continued to get better and better as the years went on. So now you've had a few players get into the mix and a few players get added to the roster, and say what you want, because as soon as this guy committed at bat 320, everyone's like, we should wait till Nate Thompson gets a hold of him, and then he's going to go around. Okay, relax. Let it get onto the field first, and then we can start our judgments there. But they're at least doing a really good job of batting some players out of the transfer portal and trying to build this roster back up. Got to give credit where credit is due. That's all I'm saying. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about something crazy that's actually not necessarily Razorback related, but still a pretty crazy story that a lot of Razorback fans are talking about. But first, I got to tell you, passion, drive, and patience. It's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and leveled up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts that you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so final segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. College World Series into Tennessee won it. Great, grand, wonderful, moving on. But that wasn't really the story that took everything by storm yesterday, because I'm not going to say like, oh, this is what I heard. I think people were kind of alluding to it and reporting it and feeling like there was a good case that the two coaches that performed in the College World Series finals, Jim Schlossnagle as well as Tony Vitello, both of them might be in the mix for the Texas job that's opened up. I remember hearing that and I was like, man, okay, well, I mean, it's in the running, doesn't mean anything's going to happen. And I remember after the game, Texas A&M lost, and Jim Schlossnagle was asked about the chances of him, being rumored with Texas and everything, and he's basically saying like, that's a disrespectful question. And he's like, that's You know, it goes into this thing. He's like, I moved my family. I just did all this stuff. I'm like, this is all I've done. Well, guess what? He's going to Texas. It's been officially announced. He's going to Texas. He's the next head coach of Texas baseball. So Texas A&M is looking for somebody. So here's the thing. It's a great hire for Texas. But what a piece of trash this guy is. Like, for real. I was never a fan of him. And I'm not going to say who, but there were certain people that I know, certain coaches that maybe I have talked to in my time, maybe former coaches, maybe current coaches. They didn't really care for him. He's very much into himself. You know, this is the same coach that was going off about, oh, that was that team that was cheating over there in the SEC earlier. So it's like, yeah, you don't say that stuff, man. You don't say that stuff. You're not supposed to do those things. There's just certain decorum. But either way, what a piece of trash. Like, I get it. If he came out and it's like, I'm not going to talk about that, man. Like, I'm not talking about that. This week our season just ended. Like, I'm focused on these kids and just everything. If he said that and then he moved on, it wouldn't be great. But like, to flat out come out like that, that's disrespectful. I did all this, and the next day the dude is gone. I actually kind of feel sorry for A&M. Not really, but kind of. I'm like, because if that was me and if that was on my team, I'd be pissed. I would be livid. I cannot believe this dude actually pulled that off. Like, that is a pretty trashy thing to do. I know it's not, and there's never a perfect way to go to another job, but I can tell you the way not to. That way. Don't handle it that way. Ever. I'm interested to see what he has to say in his press conference and if he'll get asked about it and see what he actually comes up with. But, yeah, pretty sleazy thing there for Jim Schlossnagle, but unfortunately it's not surprising. Appreciate everybody listening in the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.